collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up on the programme this week, we're concentrating on the Cyprus negotiations that have been taking place in Geneva, Switzerland all week. We'll hear about Cypriots' hopes and expectations at the beginning of the week.
Everybody hopes. Hope dies last. But I know there will not be a solution because they are all fooling with us.
Talk to people who attended an event to try and persuade the leaders to reach an agreement, whatever.
We want our president to try his hardest, do all he can to make sure that we agree on a solution.
Hear from a journalist and activist about his thoughts of what might come out of the negotiations.
I believe it's the final opportunity we have. It's the last chance in the framework of a federated unification. If we don't have it this time, it will result to a great disappointment.
And talk to a professor of history and politics about what comes next.
And after a second referendum that goes wrong with a Turkish Cypriot yes and a Greek Cypriot no, the Turkish claim for recognition of the North or even the potential of annexation has much more credibility.
Well, it's been a tumultuous week for everybody in Cyprus as the final stage of the reunification negotiations take place in Geneva. On Monday morning, as the leaders gathered for the first of those meetings, I took a stroll down Nicosia's Lydra Street to the crossing point to the north of the island, and I spoke to a selection of people, asking them what their hopes and fears were for the coming negotiations.
One time we're optimistic, the next time we're not. It's complicated. I think the Cypriots are optimistic, but really, I'm confused.
We're hopeful for a solution because we believe that the president, our president, Anastasiadis, has a clear mind about the solution, and we believe that we can live with the Turkish Cypriots in one country, not divided.
I'm in the side of the president. I think he's very good and he's one of the best of the presidents of the Republic of Cyprus, and also the leader of the other side is, I think it's a good one. I'm not sure about him, and I hope for a good solution in this year, in 17.
Everybody hopes. Hope dies last. But I know there will not be a solution because they are all fooling with us.
We are both victims of the Turkish invasion in Cyprus. We have lost everything in Cyprus, and my experience with the Turks says that you don't have to trust them for anything. So I'm not optimistic at all about the situation because they never respect their signature, they never respect human rights, they never respect anything.
So you're hoping there will not be a solution?
Yes, of course. And I prefer to have a separation instead of having them controlling my village and controlling the other side as well.
Are you hopeful for a solution?
No, I'm not. I'm not actually. It's not because I don't want to. I want to be for the island to be reunited. But the thing with the talks, it doesn't seem to go anywhere.
On Tuesday evening, I went down to the buffer zone by the Lydra Palace, that's the UN headquarters, along the Green Line in Nicosia, where several hundred organisations, NGOs, trade unions and so on from both sides of the divide had organised an event to encourage the leaders to overcome whatever obstacles they had to and reach an agreed solution to the Cyprus problem. I spoke to some of the people attending.
We want to show with our presence that we want our president to try his hardest, do all he can to make sure that we agree on a solution.
How do you think an event like this is going to persuade them? Because last time we met in November, they came home having failed.
I'm not sure it can persuade them, but it will show them what the people want.
I fully endorse my wife's statements.
A lot of people think that if there is an agreement, we're laying ourselves open to a time of uncertainty, possibly tension, and possibly more intercommunal strife. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say that what we are experiencing right now is very temporary, even though we do not realize it, because especially the Greek Cypriots seem to be living in a rather comfortable and peaceful environment. But if a solution is not we're not going to reach a solution, then I think it's going to be very uncertain times, because I don't think that Turkey will let the situation flow as it's flowing right now. Things will change totally.
What I want to say is that if we manage to agree with the Turkish Cypriots, it will be a victory no matter what, even if a solution is not realized in the end, because it will show us and the world that we have grown up and that we don't need anybody to chaperone us, yes? So that we can deal with our own fate on our own.
If you ask me about my beliefs, if they don't come back with a solution now, I don't think they're coming back with any solution whatsoever in the near future or in the future.
And what would that mean for Cyprus, do you think?
A total split of the island.
Partition?
Yeah, one way or another, yes. I don't think there's any more chance for any more talks or any more negotiations.
Tuesday's event was not as well attended as many would have hoped, but to be honest, it was very cold indeed and had been pouring with rain all day. So the field where the event took place was rather like a quagmire. Nevertheless, about 1,000 people did gather with their flags and their banners and enjoyed the company of others who were looking for a Cyprus solution. Kyriakos Pieridis is a journalist who's worked for many years on the Cyprus issue, and I asked him why he thought there was a lower than expected turnout.
We don't have the expected people because people are still waiting. The vast majority is in a standby mode. They are waiting for the good news. They are waiting for their leadership to deliver, and this is the case for many years. They are used to live separately. They are used to go through all these failures for decades, and a lot of people do not believe that there will be a successful outcome.
What do you believe?
I believe it's the final opportunity we have. It's the last chance in the framework of a federated unification. If we don't have it this time, it will result to a great disappointment, and you cannot measure what will be the day after. Definitely the international community will come to some conclusions, and the people will go back to their homes.
But on a political level, what do you see being the outcome of no agreement?
I think we are at the edge of either to succeed or having a complete failure.
And what does complete failure entail? A lot of people are talking about the possibility of Turkey annexing the north of Cyprus and the Green Line becoming the border with the Turkish province. Do you think that's a remote possibility?
I think the discussion will be formulated as the following. We tried many times in the past. We have the generation of the politicians who are able to deliver. We didn't succeed, and we need to answer some fundamental questions. And one of the fundamental questions they will set on the agenda is what to do with the Turkish Cypriot community. What would be the future of the Turkish Cypriot community? And based on this question, you can have a lot of answers, provided that these answers will be given not only from the Turkish Cypriots themselves, but from the international community, the European Union, and Turkey. Turkey will have certain demands. Most probably they would like to keep the power they have in Cyprus, and then they will ask for exchanges for the Turkish Cypriot community as a special area for the European Union. They will ask for direct trade, they will ask for a sort of a recognition, not a full recognition, and the Turkish Cypriots will move towards this direction. They will ask for that, and this will create a serious gap on the relationship with the Greek Cypriots.
And where does it leave the Greek Cypriot community in this event? Because they will stay with a very small piece of their island and no prospects for growth, for investment or anything else.
On the political field, they will go back to a defensive position as they did just after 2004. The public opinion will align itself with the decisions of their leadership. They will move into the pre-elections period for the presidential elections. They will go back to business as usual. On the other hand, they have huge challenges on the economic field. They will try to survive as they did just after the economic crisis. It will be very, very difficult because they have exploited all the resources they have based on the areas controlled by the Republic of Cyprus. They will try to survive with their existing tools. It will be a completely different environment for both sides, and very few room for any consideration for the future, for any format of unification. It will be like each side will take its own course.
And finally, what do you think about what's been going on in Geneva with the leaking of documents and the party leaders from the rejectionist parties obviously doing their utmost to make sure that there isn't any agreement?
This was a well-known situation even before Geneva. I think it's very clear which are the political forces in favor of the solution based on the bizonal, bicommunal federation. These are well-known, let's say, power politics inside the Greek Cypriot community and the Greek Cypriot society. The big question mark is whether Anastasiadis will decide to move on, and especially in tomorrow's meeting when they will have to address the territorial aspect of the Cyprus problem, whether they will come to the final decision to pick up everything of their leftovers from previous negotiation and decide to fill the gaps, including the map. From the moment they decide to move on, they can finish everything of what has been considered as differences, remaining differences. If they do not, most probably the next day, the day after, the international conference.
Though it may not take place if there's no agreement.
It might not take place. It might take place with many, many open fronts, which will make things too difficult to come to a compromise.
And the Cypriots that you speak to, because you're a journalist too, and you're very much involved in the whole process in terms of informing people, what do you think the average man in the street thinks about the fact that several of our smaller parties don't want a solution? They've made that very clear. They only want to go back to pre-1974, which I think most thinking people realise is just never going to happen. You can't turn back the clock of history.
Most probably the situation in case of a failure will be very in favour of these forces, because they can build up their own agenda, and it would be easy to reach the majority of the people from the moment that even now, while we are speaking, a lot of people do not really believe that we can have a successful story with the Cyprus problem. So the playground for them is open, and they will be able to gain the power in both sides, I can say, not only for the Greek Cypriots but also for the Turkish Cypriots. I mean, these positions will be the prevailing ones when we have a failure. On the other hand, if we succeed to have a breakthrough, most probably we will be able to mobilize a different narrative for the political forces in favor of the solution, can produce a new narrative for the public opinion. They have to work hard, of course, because certain parts of this compromise need to be explained to people and also address issues which have never been discussed among the public. So it requires a lot of effort, a lot of discussion among people in order to get them on track. It's not easy, but it's manageable, I think. They can do it.
Kyriakos Pieridis, a journalist and activist on the Cyprus issue. There was somewhat of a hiatus at the beginning of the week when documents that had been shared with the leaders of the parties who were accompanying President Anastasiadis were leaked to the press. The President said he wouldn't be giving any more documents to those accompanying him unless they were on the negotiating teams, and that seemed to be that. But then, in the middle of the week, just before the leaders were due to exchange their maps, something that's never ever been done before in the course of the years of negotiations on Cyprus, those too were leaked. Well, at least an idea of what was in them was leaked. Many sources said they weren't actually accurate, but once again it showed that there are a lot of people who would like to scupper the negotiations entirely. In the event, the exchange of maps went ahead, as did the international conference taking place with the guarantor powers of Greece, Turkey and the United Kingdom, with Federica Mogherini of the EU and Jean-Claude Juncker also sitting in as observers.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
And we continue with the issue of those negotiations that have been going on in Switzerland all week. Joining us now is Professor of History and Political Science at Nicosia University, Hubert Faustmann. Hubert, you've followed all of this, well, you've been following it for years, but what do you feel is the outcome of these talks in Geneva?
What I expect is neither a failure nor a success of the talks, but the beginning of a process that will, I fear, drag on, at least until after the referendum in Turkey is over. And that is based on the assumption that President Erdogan really wants a settlement, which is one of the big questions. So I don't expect a success today. I expect progress in the meetings, and then they will reconvene in a couple of weeks, maybe several times, until the moment of truth arrives in as such that there are no excuses anymore to track the process on.
It seems rather as if the goalposts have moved quite considerably in the last 10 days.
Well, I'm not sure if they have moved in the sense the demands are pretty much there, in my understanding, as they have been there. Now is the haggling over the Treaty of Guarantee and the security, and they started off with the known positions, and we also know where the known solutions are. It's a question which of them are going to be picked, and this is the moment of truth on the security and guarantee question. Will there be a sunset clause? How will the Treaty of Guarantee be modified? Will it expire? Somewhere there is the realm of agreement, and only if the three sides are willing to move on that front we will actually see an agreement. On the domestic issues, on the map issue, I don't see a change. Morpho is still the bone of contention, but it's clear that Morpho will be given. So I don't think that territory will be the stumbling block. Property, they're still haggling over many details on issues, and I think there's still a considerable gap between the two sides that could cause problems. That includes also the financial side, but there's also nothing new. To me, it's not certain that what they come up with is actually financeable. Governance, the rotating presidency is a bargaining chip of the Greek Cypriots. It will is as likely to be given as Morpho. Just the Greek Cypriots are holding back because it's their last bargaining chip, and they wait what they get on security and guarantees, which makes tactically sense. But we're now stuck in a situation where everybody's in the final poker game and everybody's waiting for the trade-offs, and they have to be linked very cleverly so that all sides feel that they don't lose out and make the right concession at the wrong time or concessions at the wrong time. So a lot is a political poker game. At the end, it's a question of will and determination. I don't think the problems are unsolvable, but I have doubts if Turkey wants really to settle the question.
Well, that is the question, isn't it? I mean, the referendum's upcoming, and Erdogan does need the support of the groups in Turkey who are more hard-line on Cyprus even than he has been in the past. Do you think that's going to be something that has an influence on Turkey's stance?
That's the main reason why I'm so skeptical that we will get success in this meeting. I don't think tactically it's in Erdogan's interest to settle now exactly for the reasons you've outlined. He needs the support of the MHP, both in Parliament and in the referendum. It's a close call in Parliament and might be a very close call in the referendum. And the CHP is also very nationalistic, so he would lose out on a front that resonates quite well with the Turkish public, and that's the issue of nationalism, by giving up on Cyprus, which he kind of has to do in order to get a Greek Cypriot signature on the deal. So even if he wants a solution, and that's a big if, and there are two schools of thought, and you can make two very convincing lines of argument that he wants one or he doesn't want a settlement, because they're both immense benefits for Turkey in a solution. But there are also immense benefits for him politically and from a nationalist perspective for Turkey if you don't settle. So only afterwards I can give you the line of argument why happened whatever happened. My personal hunch is that there will definitely not be anything before the referendum. And then we'll find out if Erdogan does his part of the deal. And then we still have to see if the Greek and the Turkish Cypriots deliver on their part. And it's anything but certain that the remaining gaps can really be bridged. So they're so close, it would be tragic if it was not Turkey, but the Cypriots who couldn't.
But if
settle.
Erdogan is given the powers that he's hoping for, then it would very much be his decision after the referendum.
It's his decision already now. I don't think there's a significant force in Turkey that has a say in the Cyprus question. This man has polarized power in Turkey, and that's why he sees it, in my view, completely through the prism of his presidency. After the referendum, we can see it through the prism of his interests or the interests of Turkey, and latest then we will find out if he's sincere. Turkey has been quite constructive so far. It's not a clear-cut story. They have allowed the process to develop in a very final phase, so it's quite risky to sabotage and undermine it. It's possible. But that's why I think there's a lot of insecurity amongst the experts. Of course, you don't want to end up on the wrong side of predictions, but there are also statements that lead to the opposite direction. We will see.
We've also heard that Federica Mogherini came up with a suggestion for the security and guarantees, although we don't, at the moment, at least I don't, know exactly what that entails. Have you got any inkling?
No, that's all I heard. I heard that Germany endorsed it, what
Yes.
I found bewildering. Okay, fine. It should be a European proposal, and Germany shouldn't play a bigger role than others in this, if you ask me, but fine. We have to see what the provisions are. The problem is not the absence of compromise solutions they can agree on. There are several models which might have a chance to pass a referendum in the south, because a bad deal on security and guarantees you a Greek Cypriot no. So the Turkish side has to move considerably on that front to give us even a chance for a yes in the referendum. So I'm pretty sure it's a smart idea, but for the reasons we just discussed, I'm not sure if they want to pick up on it, even if they want to settle, because that would trigger dynamics that will harm Erdogan's domestic agenda.
It sounds like you think that there would again be a Turkish Cypriot yes to a referendum, and that, as far as I'm aware, is not any longer a given.
I agree. I also point this out, and in particular if the security arrangement is leaning towards the Greek Cypriot position, so if it's assuring them enough that there's a chance for a yes vote, this increases, given that we have a classical security dilemma here, the insecurity of the Turkish Cypriots, and you have polls in the north that are worrying. A lot will also depend on the role of Turkey behind the scenes. Do they actually want a deal? You might, if you're really mean, you can say if they're afraid of a Greek Cypriot yes, they might want to sabotage this with a Turkish Cypriot no. Would not be a very promising policy line, but it would be a last resort if you really gambled on a Greek Cypriot no and now your bluff was called, which is my personal reading, that Turkey might want to go for a kind of deal it expects to be rejected in the south and then continue to sit on the moral high ground they've occupied since 2004. So without making any real concessions, you're seen as the pro-solution side. And after a second referendum that goes wrong with a Turkish Cypriot yes and a Greek Cypriot no, the Turkish claim for recognition of the North or even the potential of annexation has much more credibility. That's my nightmare scenario, but to come back to your point, a Turkish Cypriot yes is much more likely than a Greek Cypriot yes, but it's not guaranteed.
And what about the feeling on the ground here in Cyprus? You talk to a lot of people with a lot of different opinions, I'm sure, as do we all. Are you getting the feeling that I mean, particularly after the statement today by the rejectionist parties saying, I'm not going to the reception and all of this stuff. Do you really think that there is the possibility that if a proposal is put forward for referendum, a majority of Greek Cypriots might say yes? There's quite a turnaround needed since 2004 for that to happen, and for some people who voted no then to change their mind.
The chances are better than in 2004. What will be fundamentally different is that this time both leaders will campaign offensively in favour of an acceptance of a deal if there is one. The other thing that is different, that Akel will stay in I'm convinced that Akel will support this time the process to the end and then not jump ship before a soft no as they did last time, sabotaging any chance if there was ever one in 2004. So it's going to be a much closer call. But a lot will depend on security and guarantees. Unless we know what the deal is and if it's acceptable for the Greek Cypriots, we don't know what the chances are. Obviously, I don't think Nikos Anastasiadis will sign a deal where he has the conviction there's no chance of passing, so it will be a very good deal on security and guarantees. So if there is a deal, there is a chance for yes, but if I had to bet money, I would rather bet money on a 52-48 no than on 52-48 yes. If we are lucky, it gets a close call in favour of a solution, if we believe the solution is going to work. We will not get a repetition of 2004. You will not get a 75-76 no vote. Of that I am certain.
What about, you talk about sustainability and a solution that works? Because that's the other big thing, isn't it? And you mentioned earlier the compensation for property, for example. I know the IMF is involved, so are many other big players. But that is one of the stumbling blocks, assuming that both sides can come to an agreement on property and territory and so on, isn't it?
It's a serious concern I have, that the financial arrangements might be problematic. We have to see how the property issue will be dealt with. If it becomes sustainable, it means that by far more Cypriots will have to pay Turks or Turks who live in the properties of Greek Cypriots, which will then affect the referendum prediction. So the cheaper the solution, the more losers there will be in Cyprus that might then tend to vote no. So we have to really see how the financial side of the property issue is dealt with. It is an Achilles heel of the deal and might be a significant burden for a unified island that might convince many not to like the deal. The political viability, unfortunately, can be questioned with good reason. It is very difficult to share power and run a country together. So I personally believe it's less the constitutional order that will be complicated that is the problem here. It is more the political elites. It is absolutely decisive that you establish a political culture of cooperation and limits of confrontation. The consensus has to be that you don't paralyze the state. There will be mechanisms for this paralysis not to occur, but that you make this entity function. If the commitment of the leaders is not there, if there's not a political culture of limits of political confrontation, then you run into trouble. And it's of utmost importance that the rejectionist parties on both sides, of which there are so many, and some of which you mentioned in your question, who I believe will run a reunified island in the ground if they have a significant say, that they don't run the country, but that moderates like Anastasiadis and Akinci run the country long enough for people to accept the new state of affairs, find it defensible, and maybe hardline parties come to terms with it and then try to improve what they don't like within the framework of a viable political entity. That's your lucky scenario. If we're unlucky, we go into something that goes like Belgium and worse. So if we talk about Belgium, that's not the worst of all scenarios, and it's quite likely that we have governmental instability, difficulties to compromise, but a peaceful island that, as a member of the European Union, moves along and is reunified and hopefully then establishes a better future in the mid and long term.
That's Hubert Faustmann, Professor of History and Political Science at the University of Nicosia. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.